Well, the higher education campuses around the country are now debating whether to implement mandatory Covid-19 vaccine rules. We're joined by Professor Ramneek Ahluwalia, the CEO of Higher Health. Professor Ahluwalia, good evening to you. Thank you for your time. Do you think this is the right thing to do, to essentially make vaccinations mandatory on campus?
Stephen, thank you, and good evening to everyone. Stephen, I think we're just 3 weeks to, or probably reaching the third week towards maturing our vaccination program. As you are aware that recently in August, towards the end of August, the President announced the expansion of the program to under 35s and above 18, which is obviously our biggest population in the post-school system. So I think these debates are very, very important because what lies in the future in terms of business continuity, in terms of saving the academic year, in terms of contact learning, because at the end, this is practically why universities are established, or TVET colleges are established, or skills development program is established. But I think at this stage, I think just 3 weeks into the program, still very premature to even talk about mandatory vaccination. And at this moment, the aim is how to fight vaccine hesitancy, to promote vaccines, and find more innovative ways, as the Minister of Health says, soft incentives. We're debating on incentivizations, finding mechanisms of how we can promote young people. I think it's fair to give as many South African and young South Africans to make a decision. It's not an easy decision. And totally understand their dilemmas. It's a needle into your arm. It's a challenging for health professionals like me. It's a day-to-day work of injecting needles or injecting injections, and knowing the value of vaccines as we do it as our profession. But having to understand an ordinary South African or an ordinary young student in an institution of higher learning, it is practically a difficult decision. And I think we need to give time. We need to keep on the dialogue. We need to keep the science in front and promote vaccines. That's the aim we are talking about, but not mandatory for now.
I mean, one of the things is that people on vaccine in universities are organized. Students are active, workers are active, they're usually represented by unions. In a way, for this to work, you actually have to take people along with you. Persuasion is much easier in the longer run.
You're absolutely right, Stephen. Nothing without the peers. We will not win this, and I make it very clear, without the students themselves. So we've got about 15,000 foot soldiers of peer educators that we built for epidemics like HIV, and they played a gender-based violence, but they played a very significant role during the COVID outbreaks, specifically in quarantine, in helping us with the close contacts, contact tracing when outbreaks happen. Remember, we are a very vulnerable sector because we're congregating young people in residences, we're congregating in classrooms. So the spread of the infection, specifically if you look at the new variants, highly transmissible, and they have affinity to young people. Not the first COVID-19 that came into South African shores or into the global world. These new mutants that we are seeing have changed their shapes and colors to such a way that they bind to human cell far more effectively and replicate far more strongly, and that's why the Delta variant is a huge challenge for the whole global world. But it's the one part is its affinity to the youth. And when you see that part, we in our system becomes extremely vulnerable settings. So we cannot win this without the young people helping us when we have to do contact tracing, or we've got many outbreaks that happen in our residences or institutions of higher learning because of the vulnerability young people pose. So I think the same army is where we are preaching, teaching, and educating for the spread of vaccine education. Nothing better than educated young South Africans in teaching other peers, families, or their own family members, or their old parents to go and push them on vaccination. We've seen some good results from Eastern Cape when we see now older people coming out to vaccinate, not in the numbers we still want, but it is predominantly some of the work that these young South Africans, which are in post-school system, which are understanding the science, even if they don't come from faculties of health sciences, are able to take back to their families. So I think we're seeing a movement here.
I mean, one of the things that's really, one of the questions that we need to ask about our vaccination rate, to try and find out what is causing the fact that we're not seeing everybody lining up to get an injection, is whether it is too difficult for people to get a vaccine. In other words, does it cost money to get into a taxi to get to the vaccination site, and that money is better spent on food for the day? Or is it because people just don't want to get a vaccine? Now, people at a campus, I presume, on a campus, you will have a vaccination site. So what that means is it may not be because it's too difficult. I mean, it might be, but it's less likely. It's more likely that people just aren't convinced yet and need a little bit more persuading.
Stephen, you're absolutely right. The first 3 weeks were extremely exciting for us when we built our vaccination sites or vaccine points. In fact, all our universities and probably more than half of our TVET colleges already have a vaccine point or a vaccination site. The only difference is vaccination sites are storage, so they're accredited, and we do not have to worry about day-to-day bringing of the vaccines, whereas in a vaccine point means we every day collect a vaccine, bring it to the site, and still administer on the site. The aim is for easy access of vaccines to young people. But you're right. Now, going down 3 weeks into our program, and that's why these debates have started, is because now we're seeing hesitancy popping up. So the people who were already convinced came and took their first dosages, or the first dose, or if a single jab of J&J, which is mostly in our rural areas, took their dose. But people who still are making their mind are still reluctant to come over. I do not think we are at a position now to say we have a vaccine deficiency or we don't have enough vaccinators. Our biggest challenge at this moment as a country, similarly in higher education, is people who are not yet convinced needs to be convinced. And that is where the maturity of our peer-to-peer engagements, using communication like yourself and responsible media to keep alerting our people, speaking to the parents, speaking to the teachers, speaking to the guardians, trying to mobilize now a movement to gradually make that confidence for people to come and take a jab. It is a difficult one, and I must tell you, it's not only now South Africa, but the entire globe, even in UK or United States, that we are in the similar challenge as South Africa is, where hesitancy is taking. And there's a huge social media movement against vaccines, which we have to grapple through science on daily basis. And it does defeat every step we take towards this milestone of getting people to a vaccine point.
Professor Ramneek Ahluwalia, the CEO of Higher Health, thanks very much indeed. Do appreciate it.